Taxes.
Cut taxes.
Tax the rich.
We stop taxing billionaires.
To tax the rich.
I think in this country, we overtax people's work.
Yeah.
And we undertax wealth.
Over the last 50 years, there's been a massive transfer of wealth from the bottom 90% to the top 1%. To the fact that 60% of our people are living paycheck to paycheck, while the billionaire class has never had it so good.
I believe that at some point in the not too distant future, you won't even have income tax to pay.
If you paid even 1 penny in federal income taxes last year, you paid more than Tesla.
Robots, technology, automation. Why are we taxing then human labor? Why do we have payroll taxes and yet have tax code that actually rewards automation?
But then you're getting a tax break, so that doesn't really make any sense.
But only up front, you're Tucker, welcome to America, buddy. This is how it's gone on for 200 years.
Something strange is happening in global politics right now, and most people are missing it. Prominent politicians, thinkers, economists, and activists from every side of the spectrum can't stop talking about tax. Many of these people would disagree about almost everything, but listen closely, and they seem to be asking the same question. Why do we tax the money people earn from work so much harder than the wealth that just sits and grows? That question is about to become the biggest political fight of the next decade. The tax settlement we've lived under since the 1980s is breaking, and everyone can feel it. They just can't agree on what replaces it. So why now? Two things hit at once. The cost of living crisis made ordinary people furious, and AI arrived, threatening the very wages the whole tax system is built on. One gave people the anger, the other put a clock on it. Let's begin with an unlikely voice, one that made headlines in an interview dishing out tax policy advice. Jeff Bezos, the man who owns Amazon and the Washington Post, said in an interview that the bottom half of Americans should stop paying income tax.
Why is a nurse in Queens who makes $75,000 a year paying more than $1,000 a month in taxes? That's $1,000 a month that could help with rent or groceries or anything.
Bezos, one of the world's richest men, and someone who has famously and legally spent years paying almost nothing in income tax, is proposing something that, on the surface, sounds great.
The bottom half of income earners in this country pay only 3% of the taxes. It's only 3%. We can find 3%. We shouldn't be asking this nurse in Queens to send money to Washington. They should be sending her an apology.
There are some problems with his logic. First, the nurse earning $75,000 a year isn't in the bottom half of earners, so scrapping tax on the bottom half wouldn't actually help her. In fact, the lowest earning 40% of Americans already pay no federal income tax, partly thanks to tax credits. And the bottom half of people who do pay income tax don't account for 3% of the burden. It's closer to 10%. So the numbers need work. But the appeal is obvious. It's simple.
There's something very powerful about zero. We're free shipping at Amazon, not like 25-cent shipping.
Bezos isn't the first to suggest this. Listen to Senator Cory Booker about 2 months earlier.
No household in America should pay federal income tax on their first $75,000 of earnings. Keep your money. I just introduced a bill to make this happen.
He's proposing the same number to the dollar. But the difference in their positions is why.
The tax system, we all know this, is rigged. It's rigged against working people and all full of things to help people with a lot of money, whether it's corporations or billionaires, avoid paying taxes. It's what happens because of the corruption down in Washington that lets the wealthiest and most powerful write our tax code. So let's unrig it.
But Bezos rejects the idea that billionaires like him are the problem.
Certainly a perfectly valid policy debate, right, to say, do we want an even more progressive tax system?
Progressive, by the way, means that the more you can afford to, the more you should pay.
So the kind of the line that gets quoted all the time is, the wealthy should pay their fair share. Right. And we can argue about what the fair share is. That's a policy debate. That's okay. But the vilification is the thing that's just the distraction. The top 1% of taxpayers pay 40% of all the tax revenue. The bottom half pay only 3%.
Across the pond, economist Gary Stevenson has a name for what Bezos is doing.
I mean, what Jeff Bezos actually said was, should we tax you more? And he's like, don't talk about that. Let's tax the viewer. And he's doing this thing which I often do in my interviews, which is when I'm being interviewed by someone who is maybe a bit of a dickhead, which happens sometimes, rather than debate the interviewer, who is often debating me in bad faith, jump over the interviewer, go to the audience and say, listen, I'm the one who is on your side, basically. And Jeff Bezos is doing this. But it has the obvious weakness of, where does the money come from?
Bezos thinks the viewers are being played too, just by politicians instead.
Politicians are using the kind of age-old technique. So there's this tale of two economies, and they're using this age-old technique of, picking a villain and pointing fingers. But the problem is that doesn't solve anything. And so, like, if you want to help the group of people who are struggling, you have to figure out real root causes and solutions, and that takes skill. It's like if we have a problem at Amazon, the way we would fix it is we would go in and we'd do the 5 whys and we'd try to get to a root cause. We'd try to find a root fix. And then when we fix it at the root, you're fixing it forever.
So Gary tried Bezos's own 5 whys.
Why can't you afford to buy a house? Because you are increasingly competing with a class of unbelievably rich people who are making $30 million every single day. Why do we have a super wealthy billionaire class now, when we didn't have that in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, when housing was much more affordable? Well, the answer is quite simply because in the 80s, we stopped taxing billionaires. In this country, I think we had 95% top income tax, 90% top inheritance tax on the very rich. Okay, so why did that happen? Why did we stop taxing the super rich in the 80s? The answer was because we lost an argument about tax and inequality and distribution. And people like Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan managed to convince the public that not taxing billionaires would be good for them. And why did that happen? We forgot the thing which our grandparents and great-grandparents and great-great-grandparents understood, which was that distribution and inequality matters.
Gary's right about the trend. Since the 1980s, most countries slashed top tax rates, and in that same window, the wealth of the global elite exploded. Here's how Gabriel Zucman, the French economist now advising the G20 on tax, puts it.
Forbes magazine ranking of global billionaires. They started doing this in 1987. In 1987, global billionaires owned in wealth the equivalent of 3% of world GDP. Wow. That means if they spent all their wealth, they could have bought the equivalent of 3% of everything that's produced in a given year globally, all the goods and services. Today, they own the equivalent of 17% of world GDP. Okay, 17%, and we're talking about roughly 3,000 households at the global level. For billionaires, of course, they're not accumulating wealth for their old days, right? For them, wealth is power. It's the power to influence markets by buying competitors. It's the power to influence the prevailing ideology by buying media companies, newspapers, and so on. It's the power to buy elections. It's the power to influence policy making. And so an extreme concentration of wealth always means an extreme concentration of power. And this is a tension that's really fundamental in our democratic societies.
When so much wealth is concentrated at the top, political decisions often benefit the billionaires more than common people. Watch this exchange with Shark Tank multimillionaire Kevin O-Leary and right-wing commentator Tucker Carlson, who couldn't understand why the ultra-rich get tax support while the rest of us foot the bill.
Then you're getting a tax break, so that doesn't really make any sense.
Only up front, you're Tucker, welcome to America, buddy. This is how it's gone on for 200 years.
Okay, well, I don't know. Lots of bad things go on for a while. But I think at some point it's worth assessing, like, why are we doing this? So
you are
on the
fair
job
to do that. You're doing it because there's a competition.
Well, I
People
run
want
a couple of businesses, and we're not getting any tax breaks. I think they're every bit as virtuous as data centers, but I'm not availing myself of that, and no one's offered. And I wouldn't take it anyway, because it's not the job of taxpayers to subsidize a private business.
It's a fair comment, but my job is to create a data center, create 2,000 jobs for long term.
Relative to the size, the physical size of the project, which, as you noted, is multiple times the size of Manhattan, and the power draw at peak, this data center, your projections, will consume about as much energy as New York City does. But New York City provides almost 5 million jobs. And this project, by your own description, would provide about 2,000 jobs.
I'm not motivated by money anymore. I don't need any more money. I've already been very successful. I'm very lucky, but I'm not finished. I'm very motivated to win.
That takes us back to Bezos. Zucman said wealth buys media. Bezos owns the Washington Post and is now handing out tax policy. His argument has one very powerful line and one very large hole. Here's the powerful line. The top 1% pay 40% of all tax revenue. And here's the hole. Two of them, actually. First, income tax is only one of the taxes ordinary people pay. Every worker also pays payroll tax. As consumers, we all pay tax every time we buy something. Count it all, and the burden on people earning an honest living is far heavier than it is on billionaires as a share of their income. Second, here's what the top 1% actually pay.
What we've discovered recently is that billionaires essentially pay almost no income tax. A few years ago, you had revelations by the US media ProPublica on the taxes paid by US billionaires. And you saw people like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos in some years reporting very little taxable income and paying very little in income tax. Even in 1 year, Jeff Bezos says, "Oh, look, I'm so poor that I'm going to claim family benefits." And he receives family benefits. That was about 10 years ago. The revelations were, in 2022, I think. And he received a check from the IRS, right? One of the wealthiest person in the world. And look, don't get me wrong. There's nothing illegal in that. As CEO of Amazon, he didn't pay himself any wage. As the controlling shareholder of Amazon, he instructed the company not to distribute any dividends, and so he didn't have any dividend income. And then he didn't sell shares in Amazon, so he didn't realize any capital gains. And so his taxable income was really low.
And here's how Warren Buffett puts it. And remember, he's one of the richest men alive, and he's also old enough to have seen various economic ideas play out.
So what has gone on in this country in the last, in very recent years, is a huge benefit to the very rich. We pay a lot of taxes, but it's really at a very low rate, and it's a rate that's less than half the tax rate that I was paying 25 years ago when I was making a lot less money. They have really taken care of the rich.
And that clip is over 20 years old. Since then, things have only gotten better for the very rich. So that's the problem. The question is what to do about it, and broadly, there are three big answers. Here's the first and the most direct. Stop taxing work so heavily and start taxing wealth instead. Zucman has a proposal, and it's deliberately modest. A 2% minimum tax on the very richest, those who own more than $100 million. Not on their income, which they can engineer down to almost nothing, but on their wealth. And wealth is far more visible than people assume. Most of it sits in shares of public companies, priced on the stock market every single day. Property is already valued and taxed by local councils every year. Even art and collectibles come with a number attached, because the owners insure them for a specific amount. The idea that you simply can't measure what the rich own is mostly a myth, and the rich barely pay anything on it. Today, the world's billionaires pay an effective rate of roughly 0.3% of their wealth, lower than a teacher, lower than a nurse in Queens. Take Zucman's proposal and zoom in on just the billionaires, around 3,000 people worldwide, and a 2% floor would raise about $250 billion a year. Extend it down to everyone worth more than $100 million, and the figure climbs by another $100 to $140 billion on top. And this is not a wacky idea, it's actually gaining momentum fast. In France, the idea, now nicknamed the tax Zucman, held the government hostage for months. It was eventually rejected by Parliament, even though the French public overwhelmingly supported it. And Zucman is confident that it will be back.
It's going to happen because these changes, they never happen in just a matter of weeks.
It's going to come back in just a few months.
In California, a billionaire tax ballot initiative for 2026 cites Zucman's research directly. At the G20, the proposal has support from leaders including Brazil's Lula and France's Macron. And in Hungary, it's no longer a proposal, it's an incoming government's program. In April 2026, Péter Magyar's Tisza party won a landslide, ending Viktor Orbán's 16 years in power. Magyar, a pro-European conservative, not a man of the left, campaigned on a wealth tax on the richest 0.2% of households, bundled with an anti-corruption purge, a new agency to claw back the fortunes of Orbán's oligarchs. Which raises the obvious objection: won't the rich just leave? It's the oldest argument against taxing wealth, and it isn't nothing. Several European countries, from Sweden to France itself, tried wealth taxes and later scrapped them, partly over fears of capital flight. In Hungary, oligarchs are already reported to be moving billions out to Dubai. But the evidence is shakier than the slogan. A Cornell study of where millionaires actually move found that the very rich have low migration rates, and of those who do move, only around 15% end up with a lower tax bill, because the connections that make people rich tend to be rooted in one place. The threat to leave, it turns out, is louder than the leaving. Plus, countries like America already have the right to tax your worldwide income. So why not your worldwide worth?
First they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, then you win.
That's the first answer: tax the wealth. But there's a second, brewing underneath all of it, and it's about machines. If artificial intelligence and robots do more and more of the work, what happens to a tax system built almost entirely on human labor? Income tax, payroll tax, the lot. It all assumes people are earning wages. So the more AI and robots compete with labor, the less wages there will be to tax. Here's Gavin Newsom asking exactly that.
Why are we taxing then human labor? Why do we have payroll taxes and yet have tax code that actually rewards automation in terms of write-offs?
And here's a very real example of this taking place. Listen to this graduate share his story about being told AI replaced his job.
And like you say, a couple of days before my dissertation presentation was due, I just got an email completely out of the blue saying, unfortunately, due to rapidly evolving business needs, we're going to have to rescind your job offer. And so I obviously panicked, and I called them up, and I called 2 different partners, and I tried to persuade them to keep me on. I thought, consulting, which is what I was going into, is famously quite cyclical, quite up and down. So I thought, maybe they just don't have much business at the moment. And the partner, first of all, told me, to be honest, it's actually AI.
Our system currently puts an artificial cost on human labor, and at the same time, artificially lowers the cost of AI and robotics. Some, like Bill Gates, have floated a literal robot tax to solve this problem.
Right now, if a human worker does $50,000 worth of work in a factory, that income is taxed. If a robot comes in to do the same thing, you'd think that we'd tax the robot at a similar level in some type of robot tax. I don't think the robot companies are going to be outraged that there might be a tax. It's okay.
The billionaire tech leaders building the machines are all saying something similar. Elon Musk and Sam Altman have both predicted a future of AI-driven abundance that could also threaten the jobs of millions of people who will not have time to adapt unless we have some kind of universal basic income. And it's not just loose talk. OpenAI published a paper calling for a public wealth fund that gives every American an automatic stake in AI. Anthropic has floated something similar. Bernie Sanders went a step further with a bill to hand the public half the stock of the biggest AI companies. In a New York Times essay, he laid out a one-time 50% tax, paid not in cash, but in shares of firms like OpenAI, Anthropic, and xAI, funneled into a public wealth fund that pays dividends straight to citizens, the way Alaska shares its oil money. And there's a third answer from the most powerful billionaire in the world right now. Trump's idea isn't to tax the rich or the robots, it's to tax imports and use the money to wipe out income tax entirely.
I believe the tariffs paid for by foreign countries will, like in the past, substantially replace the modern-day system of income tax, taking a great financial burden off the people that I love.
It's a powerful pitch. It's also, on the arithmetic, very hard to make work. In 2025, the US collected roughly $2.66 trillion from individual income tax, about half of all federal revenue. Tariffs that same year brought in around $195 billion. To replace one with the other, you'd have to tax imports at rates the economy couldn't bear. And the smaller the imports get, the less you collect. On top of that, the Supreme Court struck down Trump's sweeping tariffs in early 2026. He reimposed them at a lower rate. So, as a budget, it doesn't add up. But as politics, it taps the exact same nerve as everyone else. Ordinary people feel overtaxed, and they want someone else to carry the load. So there are your three bets. Tax the wealth, tax the robots, or make the outside world pay. It's not just the ideas that are interesting, it's who's reaching for them. Because this has stopped being a left-wing crusade. It's breaking out right across the spectrum. Start on the left. Probably the most exciting politician of the moment is New York's Mayor Zohran Mamdani, who ran on Tax the Rich and won. He also delivered.
When I ran for mayor, I said I was going to tax the rich. Well, today, we're taxing the rich. I'm thrilled to announce we've secured a pied-à-terre tax, the first in New York's history. This is an annual fee on luxury properties worth more than $5 million, whose owners do not live full-time in the city. Like for this penthouse.
The version that actually passed went further than the pitch. It hits second homes worth $1 million and up, with rates climbing to 6.5% on the priciest, and is expected to raise around $500 million a year. And listen to Jeff Bezos' reaction to that tax.
I think that the pied-à-terre tax is a fine thing for New York to do. Taxes on out-of-towners are very popular tax.
The more the billionaires speak, the more it seems like we've been leaving a lot of money on the table. Here's the UK Green leader, Zach Polanski, who is rising fast in popularity on this narrative.
It is time to tax the rich. It is time to recognize inequality lies at the heart of all of our problems.
And though his right-wing counterpart is much more hesitant about taxing billionaires and more concerned about the public coffers, he too knows where public sentiment is heading.
We want to cut taxes, of course we do.
And here's the new British Prime Minister, Andy Burnham.
I think in this country we overtax people's work and we undertax wealth.
The truth is, this discussion is happening everywhere. Javier Milei taking a literal chainsaw to taxes in Argentina, Alice Weidel and the AfD running on tax relief in Germany, Mark Carney winning Canada on a middle-class tax cut. Everyone's coming at it from a different angle, but underneath, they're all making the same bet, that the deal we built in the 1980s has finally run out of road. Strip away the slogans, and almost everyone is selling the same promise. If you work for a living, you should keep more of it. And the smartest version of the argument doesn't treat it as either /or. Here's Senator Chris Van Hollen.
I do not view this bill, the Working Americans Tax Cut Plan, as the exclusive Democratic plan. Not at all. I support other plans, including some of the plans to provide a wealth tax, and I support increases in the child tax credit, including the refundable tax credit. I don't see these as mutually exclusive. That said, I do see our plan as a fundamental pillar of any Democratic plan.
That's the whole realignment in one breath. Cut the tax on work and tax the wealth, not one or the other. And with the race to take on Trump already starting, the politician who can bottle that message has a serious opportunity. But the most hopeful version of it doesn't come from a politician at all. It comes from a group of millionaires going door to door, asking strangers to raise taxes on people like them.
We want to pay some more taxes so that working people can pay less taxes. We're trying to get backing for the Working Americans Tax Cut Act.
This is a proposal that would eliminate federal income taxes for anybody making less than $46,000 a year and shift them to people like Monica with a little surtax on the first dollar of the second million.
Think about how strange that is. The people who'd pay the bill are the ones knocking on doors to ask for it. For half a century, we've taxed work hard and wealth barely at all. That arrangement is now under attack from every direction at once. Left, right, populist, technocrat, even some of the billionaires themselves. They disagree about who exactly should pay instead and what they should be paying for. But that argument is going to define the next decade. The era where we just all accepted the settlement of the 1980s is ending. A realignment is coming, in our lifetimes. And here's the part the politicians won't say out loud. Which way it breaks isn't up to them. When the billionaires are the ones asking to be taxed, the only thing still missing is voters who know what to demand. So let's start paying attention. Welcome to Tax Tantrums. Subscribe for more.